And our topic today, and this is especially interesting because it's not really an easy and beloved topic, is data integrity. And I'm very happy to introduce to you Anne Woitzik. She started her career in Roche. Before she joined KVALITO as science consultant and data integrity expert, she worked in Washington, D.C. She dealt a lot with the FDA there, and now she is quite a lot into data integrity in our team. Before we start, I would like to also thank our team, especially Florian and Sandra, who organized this event. And if you are in social media, please feel free to use our hashtags which we prepared today, which is KVALITO event and smart event. So I would say enjoy, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. All right. Well, also from me, a warm welcome. Thank you all for coming out to Basel today. I hope you enjoy this event. So this is also my first public speaker event, more or less. So be patient with me, and I hope to get you started on data integrity if you're not already an expert. So we have a very diverse crowd today. We have some very seasoned people in the quality management arena, and especially data integrity expert also, and as well as very young professionals who are just starting out. So we thought it would also be fun to keep it as interactive as possible and just to have a dialogue. So for me, that's also very important, to not just have this as a one-sided event, but if at any point you have questions or you would like to comment or raise a suggestion or something, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I would very much welcome that, since this is 2 hours more or less, and I am thankful for every break of speaking. And so let me just grab my pointer, because without that I think it would be a little bit difficult. All right. So you hear about data integrity. Data integrity is not a new topic, but has come up recently as it has been a focus of the FDA audits more and more. We've seen more and more warning letters coming through regarding this topic, which I will point out later as well. But in the industry, it's a good topic to be educated in right now, and we thought you might as well enjoy that. So before I start, I would like to give you a little bit information about me. Magdalena already pointed out my previous career at Roche before joining KVALITO. But even before that, I'd like to just dig in and give you some facts so that you know who is talking to you for the next couple of hours. So I'm originally from Bad Dürkheim, which is a little wine city, wine town, close to the French border in southwest Germany. If you get a chance, visit. It's fabulous, especially in the late autumn. We have the biggest wine fest in the world, so I'm very proud. And that's where I grew up. I then started you maybe know it as dual studies or duales studium. It's basically a sponsored traineeship, junior traineeship, and they sponsor you throughout your studies, and that's when I started with Roche in Mannheim. But I've also had some assignments in Spain and in Oro Valley in Arizona in the US. That's where I first actually in the US and Arizona got into the topic of quality management and health policy. So that was very, very interesting, and also great weather. And then after I was done with my studies, went on and joined the government affairs team in Washington, D.C., also with Roche. So this was all Roche Diagnostics, so medical device industry. and spent about 2 years in Washington. It was very, very interesting. We had a lot of collaboration with the FDA, especially through regulatory aspects and coalitions, and it was good to really get the first-hand knowledge, not only from FDA but also from other companies, and really to get a broader picture. And also US is a very important market, so yeah. And then I decided about a year and a half ago, it's time to go back to Europe, and that's when I got into contact with Magdalena, and I knew for myself I wanted to get into consulting, and since then I'm with KVALITO, and I also wanted to go more into IT and quality management, so it was the perfect fit. And currently, and also in my previous assignment, I've been doing a lot about data integrity, and really enjoyed this. It's sometimes a little tedious, but I think you can really see the results if you're really focused on it, and it's a very I think it's a very interesting topic, and a lot to discuss. So it's a buzz right now. Also, I put down there my LinkedIn, so I will send around the slides after this. So feel free to click on the link or add me. Also feel free to follow us on Twitter or Facebook and all this social media if you're into it. All right, so what are we going to do today? I just quickly want to tell you about the agenda. First, I'll give you a little presentation, but also already at this point, feel free to comment or ask questions. I want to start out with ALCOA because this data integrity and the ALCOA principle, which I will point out to you in a minute, go hand in hand. And if anything, this is what I want you to take away from today, that the ALCOA principle is key, and it goes through data integrity like a red line. Also, of course, you have other principles, you have other regulations, also more European focused. But I thought it would be a good way to start out with the ALCOA principle, since this is really key. Then I want to talk about the regulations and guidance, really how it got, for example, to this ALCOA principle, what's important. I don't want to dwell too long on it, because sometimes it can be a little, not boring, but a little, one-sided, so that's why I want to step into the recent data integrity sanctions and warning letters, and really what are the issues here right away, because I think this is where we can improve the most. Then I want to point out how do we get there, so what are the key factors to achieve data integrity compliance, and a very, very important aspect, in my opinion, is the culture, and how to basically get a good culture so that everybody feels free to speak up if there is a data integrity issue or something to improve, because in my opinion, it's really the people that in the end make data integrity either a hit or a miss for the company. And then after that, I want to have a short quiz with you, so I'll show you later, but it will be hopefully a fun quiz as well. And you can also win something, so please listen carefully. So you can win actually a data integrity guidebook, which also has been published now in German. So feel free to listen up carefully to be able to get the quiz to win the prize. And then at the end, I'll just list references real quick, but you can also just read that when I hand out or when I send you the presentation. And we'll also have a break before the quiz, so I don't think that I'll be presenting in front of you for the whole 2 hours, so we should have a quick coffee or something, and we still have a lot, I think, at the breakfast, so you can also get a second breakfast. All right. Okay, so ALCOA. Some of you might have heard it already, but I really want to start out with ALCOA because this is, in my opinion, really key. ALCOA first came up basically with the FDA, and it's also mentioned in the FDA guideline, which was published in April last year. and it's basically defining standards as a proof of data quality. And if you follow this core principle with all your data and all of your data lifecycle, you're already on a good way to achieve data integrity. So the first letter is A, which is attributable. You can read here, knowing where the data originated from and identifying the person who did the work or entered the data's origin. So I would say audit trail, for example, or timestamps in general are key here. You always have to know, if you generate data, who did that. So that in the case of inspection or an audit, you know who generated or altered or deleted your data. So attributable is really key. Then, of course, legible. You have to be able to read the data, right? So presenting the data in a clear, readable way. If changes are there in the data, both the new and old values can be reviewed. Also, legible means that you should not be able to change the data. So don't use pencils, use pens, just make sure that you can read your records. Don't scribble or anything. So the FDA is really focused here, and also not to use pencils. Just make sure your data is readable. Then contemporaneous, entering the data at the time or as close to possible when the activity occurred. So I can give you a little example of that. If you're in the manufacturing area and you're preparing a batch, and you do a certain step of the manufacturing process, and you enter it in your system, your manufacturing execution system, then don't do that 2 hours later, but do it at the time that it occurred. And I know this can be difficult sometimes, but this is really key. So make sure that whenever you generate data, that you document it right when it happened, or as close as possible to when it happened. Because otherwise you probably won't be able to remember your data, and mistakes could occur. The next letter is original. So the inclusion of the earliest record in all data, which should not be obscured by following records. So don't, for example, if you have a measurement, you measure the pH value of some kind of drug substance, then don't just write it on a glove or something and then go with that glove to your system, but make sure to, because then you would have, would be your original document, the glove, and you'd have to put it in your batch record or in your documentation. So make sure that you enter it in the original system, and because that's then your original data, right? So that every data that you generate, that this is really the original data or a true copy. Then accurate, right? So accurate, a valid representation of results from a data source, and ensuring that all corrections are recorded and acceptable explanations are provided for why changes took place. So of course, we're all human, we all make mistakes. So if you discover that some kind of mistake was entered in your data, make sure to just cross it out correctly. There's a whole other section of good documentation practice, which I'm not going to go into right now, but just make sure that your data is accurate, and that it's not some kind of going around, because people do, and inspectors do detect that. My final words are basically to remember that a strong quality culture is best indicated by what is done when nobody's looking. So this is really the definition of integrity. Even if you don't have cameras, even when you know nobody is looking, you should behave in a quality, efficient manner in your own and in your company's best interest. And this is, of course, I think I made this quite clear, that the culture is the cornerstone of quality and is key in every initiative and every quality project that you do have. All right. So I'd say, do you have any questions, further comments to this part so far? Please, Gary. Ah.
Thank you. I think one of the biggest challenges we will face is what data do we manage? In a big organisation, you can imagine the amount of data that exists within that organisation. What is the focus? What is the data that we have to manage and control? So a company would have a lot of financial information, a lot of project management information, but I think the key is what is the data that affects the product quality and the patient safety? And I think it's easy for an organisation to have an overreaction. Like we saw the introduction of 21 CFR Part 11, and all these companies had a knee-jerk reaction that says, right, we have to audit trail all information. And if we have a record, we have to sign it. And it was like a big overreaction. And of course, you have to go back to the predicate rules that say, what is the critical information? Now, before we had electronic records, we had paper records. And what were the records that we had to sign? Mm-hmm. So why, when you make them electronic, why did suddenly everybody has to sign everything? It was like an overreaction. So I think the focus now has to be what is the critical data and what do we have to control? And we have to remember that controls cost money. And all companies have tight budgets, as we know. So we cannot afford massive controls on everything. So it's risk-based, as you mentioned before. So again, you have to focus on what's the critical information. I think that's the key. And you mentioned before something interesting. You talked about data maps. And that's really interesting. You know, I like to think on the whole life cycle from product discovery all the way through to product delivery. And that includes things like clinical trials and management of products, warehousing, delivery, delivery under controlled conditions like, keeping it under certain temperatures, batch records, all that stuff that goes from the whole path from discovery all the way through to delivery. And if you had a data map that showed where is the critical data all the way along that path, and what are the things that can go wrong, that's what I like to focus on. And what's the worst thing that can possibly happen? And that's where you have to put your controls, I think.
To your first point, thanks for bringing this. To your first point, you mentioned that you have to really identify what is your GXP or GMP relevant data, not to control everything. And I think companies are doing that. I think they're going back, they're carrying out risk analysis. So for example, you had, I've seen this forest principle for almost every step in your manufacturing process, right? Even when it was not necessarily necessary. And I think companies employed initiatives, risk analysis, to really go a step back and see, okay, where do we actually have to employ this? So when they go from, of course, it's a huge shift in culture as well. When you roll out a computerized system where before everything was paper-based, people are afraid of the new, right? They want to make sure everything that they do is right, that maybe they don't trust the system really. And then after a couple of months, couple of years, it becomes more clear what is the relevant data that really needs to be controlled. You have, I don't know, deviations maybe at some stages that occur. Okay, we need to have another control here. Maybe everything works perfectly, then you can reduce. So I think it's companies are more and more getting towards it. And also to your second point, data maps, of course, this is how you visualize the data. Now it's very, I'm kind of doing this myself right now, but it's very tedious, and it's a very interesting project because, of course, you have this big picture. You have, I don't know, equipment that's in your I'm just talking about manufacturing processes right now, for example. You have computerized systems, you have people, right? You have processes. So to really visualize this and get everything together is a big challenge. But I think it's key to start that and to show inspectors and regulatory authorities that you are that you really want to identify these gaps, and that you are creating a culture where this is accepted. And I think it's a step into the right direction before maybe installing cameras. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm working with Novartis at the moment. I think we see swings within the industry where they go to an extreme where they want to control everything. And now I'm seeing in Novartis the pendulum is going back in the other direction when they're trying to remove controls because of the cost. And you mentioned GXP and non-GXP systems. And we're seeing almost the removal of all controls around non-GXP systems, which I think is an extreme reaction in the other way.
Okay.
You know, it's like, you know, it's... I'm not sure what I was trying to say there, but yeah, it's...
Could I perhaps support you?
Yeah, pick up, yeah.
I'm somewhat tending to agree and somewhat disagree. I would agree that controls are important only where absolutely necessary. That's true. Over-control is non-productive, costly, inefficient. But a risk assessment to understand where those controls are on everything is clearly needed. And the best practices that underlie everything else must be also sound. I think, again, the pharmaceutical industry, for those of us who've worked in many other industries, recognize that quality is a worthwhile objective and a necessary objective everywhere. So the pharma industry sadly seems to have the attitude of high degree of control on a small amount of stuff and Wild West on everything else. What's missing is not necessarily the high degree of control where necessary, it's the underlying generic good practices, understanding, approach to risk and culture that on everything else. That's what's missing. I think, talking to your earlier point, the thing I'd like to bring out of what you said, I think, sort of emphasize what I think you said, was that it's not just about data integrity. That is a little bit too specific for me. I like always to talk about data lifecycle integrity, and that brings in all these elements of data maps. These concepts of analyzing risks and data throughout all of its many manifestations, collection, transaction processing, analysis, archiving, and so on. There's much resistance to that kind of activity of data analysis because people say, we've got all of this data, how can we possibly analyze and track it throughout? The key to that, of course, is to group the data into objects and track those. You cannot manage individual pieces of data unless there are absolutely the half dozen critical ones.
Right.
So, yeah. I mean, again, we could go on with this for a long time,
Yeah,
but I
yeah.
just thought this was worth adding to what you said.
But I like your comment with the Wild West and then the over-regulated, the discrepancy basically between it. But because what do? You know, you have non-GXP systems, you have highly GXP relevant systems or processes or whatever. And what if you have people maybe working one day non-GXP and then in a GXP environment, right? It's all the same culture. And if you employ one thinking in this box and then the other one in this box, there's a disconnect, and
it's not healthy, it's not helpful.
Yeah, I think. All right, thanks.
I think you need to define some basic rules that applies for everyone. It doesn't matter if they work in GXP or non-GXP areas. So kind of speak-up culture, I think, is in both areas really necessary, because you should, if you see something that is not right, you should bring this up, talk to your management, but of course I completely agree, you need to have a risk-based approach, defining what is critical, what is not, and focus the efforts in this area. So you should not overdo, and cameras would be an absolutely overkill. I think no one should really implement, because once you implement this in your company, this will have impact on the whole industry, because the regulators come, see this, and then the expectations also increase. So we should really deal with this topic very thoughtful, not have a hype like with what happened with Part 11, and this happened also, and now it went back to normality. At the moment, it's a big hype. We have to bring enough controls to respond to the requirements, but at the same time to implement also something that makes sense, is sustainable, and at the end of the day, it's about the product quality. So we need to make sure we deliver good products to the patients. That's all about it. But I think what is very important that you have an overall strategy on this topic, because it's not just enough to assess systems to see where you have gaps. You need a holistic approach. You need to reach out by training, by culture, by policies. You need to integrate this in your quality management system, in the different procedures. So it's a very complex topic. That's why you need to fully have the commitment from your management. Otherwise, it's not going to work out successfully, I think.
And I think this is where companies struggle the most, right? That they say, oh, this is just another quality topic, right? This is just another hype. And it's important, also this non-GXP, GXP basic rules to have this. If you want to really employ this in your whole company, then you cannot have this just as a simple quality topic somewhere, in your organization, but that everything is affected and that it's visible, right? That people know about it. This is, I think, sometimes difficult to employ and to really get this message. But that's what we're here for, right? That's why we try to enforce it. You have another point, Peter?
Yeah, just another qualifying comment on what everybody's saying, I think, is that it's not just the pharmaceutical industry. I think all large corporate industry today has forgotten, as an old guy, an old grufty, I can make this statement quite easily, has forgotten all about the lessons of history, the best practices that have been developed over the decades, which are still valid today. In the search for new technologies and innovation, we're always only too willing to throw away the old stuff. And that is why I think we've lost this basis of good practice within large corporates that causes us to encounter these situations today, these challenges and this push for striving for control over stuff which is no longer under control, which was previously de facto routine in many cases.
Well, and then you also have the fact of historical data, right? That's just flying around. Yeah. All right. Here.
To the old time, I'm also not the newest one. Is in the old time the companies accept quality as a way to detect mistakes and to correct mistakes. Actually, quality means no mistakes. And this is the biggest mistakes. Mistakes can happen always, but you have to think how you can find it. A mistake that you find is a failure. If you don't find it, it's a problem.
It's a prevention, right?
Just think about what can happen. How can I find out if something go wrong? This is for me much more important than just to fill out papers and say, oh, I have quality, I have 10,000 pages written.
So detectability as part of risk management is very important.
Detectability, think about what could go wrong. How can I find it? This is the important point. Before you sell the products or so. If the product is by the patient, you have a problem.
And then that leads back to process design.
But this is,
if you design in the potential for errors.
Right.
this is for me the biggest culture change to the past.
Yeah. Here.
When I was talking about cameras, I didn't really mean it. I mean, everyone should have a camera in his back. It's just, you know, you always have motivated people and not motivated people. It's always someone's guilt that the people are not motivated, but sometimes it's also just the kind of work they are doing, like repetitive work. So if people are doing repetitive work, it's not really motivating them. So it's hard to give them an environment which is motivating them at this work. So people who are doing this kind of work, they need more control. You need more kind of cameras, or just to have someone who is looking what they're doing all day long. As soon as you have more, work where you have the ability to create something new, and then you're motivated just from your work as such. And if you have a company which is behind you and is really also pushing you to achieve new levels of quality or of products, then you don't need control. Then the control is more the giving you, the aspect that no one is really trusting what you're doing.
I think it's about finding a good balance, right?
Yeah, and you really have to look at what the people are doing, what level the people are employed, if you need control or not.
Are we running okay for time?
Sandra, are we? Yes, we're good?
Okay.
Okay, yeah, please. I enjoy this dialogue very much.
It's fun. I think in these routine jobs with high need for control, for me the audit trail has been one of the key tools, which equates in many ways to the concept of a camera. Or the flight recorder, or whatever. It's a means of recording what happened. And when you talked earlier about the need to be seen within your quality management system to review audit trails. And that generates an enormous amount of resistance, both from the technology people and from the business people. An enormous amount of resistance. How am I supposed to review an audit trail? We generate 5 million transactions as a company every hour, la 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 la. And the key to finding a solution to this need, a specified, defined need, is, in my opinion, to have the proper risk assessment, so we know what's critical, not just what pieces of data are critical, but which events, which constellation of pieces of data are critical or could indicate a problem. So it's the understanding of what's going on and what it is we want to identify, also in these production environments, with sequence of events, because that's what audit trails are also about. It's not just accuracy, it's about the ability to reconstruct events. And so with these kinds of analyses, which can be automated to examine these millions of transactions, we can pull out whatever handful of events that we're really interested in as being high risk or patterns.
Yeah, I mean, there's also this aspect of trust, right?
Yeah.
You cannot, basically, there's a certain amount you can control, but if you don't trust your employees and, that they, for example, behave according to the SOP, then, then your company is basically worthless if you don't have this trust. So
such examinations of an audit trail can help support evidence of compliance with procedures.
Right, but then this goes also on the next level. Do you trust your suppliers? Do you trust the people that installed your system, developed your system? Right? You can spin this for endlessly, right?
It's a big picture.
Yeah.
Very big picture.
All right, thank you, Peter. All right, I think it's time for another break. If you want to grab something else, I'll prepare the sheets for you. So I prepared a little quiz, and I'll explain it to you once you get back. So let's say about like 5 to 10 minutes. We'll give you a little break, and then I'll put the little quizzes on everybody's seat, and then we'll have a fun little quiz with a few winners for the prize. All right, thank you.